The Chargers had their biggest test of the season on Monday Night Football against the Ravens.
Kristaps Porzingis comes back.
Kyle Whittingham offered an update about his decision about when or if he will return for next season.
It's Clemson Hate Week. We are back.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The Baltimore Ravens needed a bounce-back win, and they absolutely got it.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
30-23, the final score. John Harbaugh victorious over Jim once again. And me being an oldest brother, I can fondly say that the older brother always wins. And that is what we saw here tonight from John Harbaugh's squad. And it was a little dicey at the very beginning there with the defense, letting up the opening drive touchdown to Justin Herbert and company. But the Ravens bounced back in a really big way. And this win is massive, and I was hyping it up all week on the show if you were listening, and I said, look, this is a massive game for multiple different reasons, and this team went out there, and look, there are complaints, but I thought that they did a lot well in this contest. So we'll obviously talk about the offense, talk about the defense, the whole 9 yards. I think, first of all, where we have to start, Lamar Jackson just continues to find ways to be clutch when it matters. There were a couple of moments early in the game. The offense just sometimes early. In fact, it's been more than sometimes early. The slow starts can be a little bit concerning on the offensive side of the ball, where it just feels like nothing is going right for them. And the Ravens have been held scoreless in the first quarter in 5 of their last 6 games. That's stuff that if you want to establish momentum, you got to be able to get out of some of your old bad habits like that. And we did see throughout the contest, I know that Carl Sheffers and his crew, not usually known for throwing penalties or getting all flag happy, but let's start there, because it seemed like late in the game, the Chargers offensive strategy was just, oh, hey, screw it. Flag's down there somewhere. Let's just go down and see if we can draw a flag. And it worked for them late. It resulted in an onside kick. But look, there were some pretty ticky-tacky calls on both sides in this game, but then there were some real ones as well. 16 total penalties in this game. The Ravens 9 for 102, another poor penalty performance from them. Chargers 7 for 62. So obviously still Baltimore has to tighten up in that regard. I'm not trying to shy away from that fact whatsoever, but you still have to be able to go out there and do your job and perform at a high level. And look, this was a game that when you're fighting with a team for playoff seeding, for AFC standing, now this game against the Ravens, they took advantage of a bad Pittsburgh loss. This is exactly like that. Pittsburgh loss would have been all for naught, right? All for naught if the Ravens hadn't done their job, came out and won this game. If they didn't do that, it would have been, Pittsburgh lost, but so did Baltimore. And we'll talk about this a little more in the second part of the show. And we talk about, to me, how big of an AFC changing win this was for the Ravens. But it's just such a big deal that they got the job done here for their own playoff standing. And when it comes to seeding as well, that's going to be big, because there are a couple of teams that Baltimore matches up very well with that this win puts them in prime position to play, whether they win the North or they don't. But getting back into the game in general, Lamar on the day, 16-22, 177 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Certainly missed some throws along the way, but had a bunch of big ones as well. Bunch of big plays also in terms of his rushing touchdown, and a couple of he amazes me every single week. And I know we're all kind of numb to it when it comes to him juking out somebody really impressively or making a cool play that only picks up 2 yards, but he goes and he runs around for 50 and makes a play. He had a couple of plays in this game where there was pressure in his face almost immediately, and he just jukes a guy out, guy touches earth, and he goes and makes something happen out of it, gets a little check down option. And that's just the beauty of what Lamar Jackson can give you, because I've been saying, if you've been listening to me here all week on Locked On Ravens back last week, what I was saying was it's a multi-step plan to bring down Lamar Jackson. First of all, you have to beat the Baltimore offensive line, but then you actually have to get Lamar Jackson on the ground. And getting Lamar Jackson on the ground, and not to mention even throwing Derrick Henry in that conversation, getting those two guys on the ground, those are two of the hardest things in football. And honestly, in my opinion, they are 1 and 2. There are no two harder things in the league than bringing down Lamar Jackson and bringing down Derrick Henry. So I don't think Lamar was like a huge storyline in this game. Obviously, he made a bunch of winning plays and, left a couple out there. But again, great throw to Bateman and an incredible catch on that play by Rashad too, man. That was unreal. Put these balls into places where guys could go and get them. But obviously, I see it in the comments a bunch. The big story here, Derrick Henry, nearly 6 yards a carry. And there were times in the game where I was wondering, all right, Derrick Henry gets a big gain on 3 or 4 straight runs, and then they take him out of the game. What are we doing here? Though there were moments like that. But overall, Derrick Henry got the job done. And of course, the Ravens were trying to run clock control, trying to bleed the clock out. And they did it with the King himself. 24 carries, 140 yards for Derrick Henry. No touchdowns. Very unfamiliar scene here for the Ravens. No touchdowns for this team. But then you have Justice Hill, who had 4 for 55. Lamar Jackson, not really a factor in the run game. Obviously did have the touchdown run. That was his big play there. But the Chargers did a pretty good job of containing Lamar on the ground. But that's not really been Lamar's game for most of the season, right? He's not running nearly as much as he has. And honestly, that's kind of an afterthought. We're like, yes, the threat of him on the ground is still very real. The gravity, as we talk about of that, is still very, very real. But at the end of the day, what you have is a player that can annihilate you in so many different ways. So Baltimore averaged 5.7 yards per carry on the ground. The two running backs, Henry, I mentioned, 5.8. Justice, 13.8, including that incredible 51-yard play. And again, Justice wasn't really getting much going on the ground other than that. He had 4 for 55, and one of those was a 51-yard play. So you do that math. The other carries were 3 for 4 yards. But what I noticed out of this Chargers group is something I've noticed all year from defenders is guys just do not want to tackle Derrick Henry. You saw these guys going for weak leg tackles, and Henry was just stiff arming them out of the way, saying, get out of here. Like that to me, that's the game plan. Give the ball to Derrick Henry. You have to be such a physical defensive front to be able to stop Derrick Henry consistently. And the Chargers had moments in the game where they did. They had moments in the game where, Henry was being tackled for losses or they read plays out. But for the most part, Derrick Henry did a great job of getting to the second level, picking up that head of steam. And Derrick Henry is the most dangerous when he's able to go out there and get to the second level, get to the third level and break one, because the more speed and the more momentum that Derrick Henry picks up over the course of this game or the course of any game, the more deadly he is. So I thought it was a great game from the Ravens on the ground. And again, despite moments where Todd Monken and the offense weren't using him when he was cooking, I thought that they got back to it in the second half, and that's what it is. The Ravens are a second half team. Honestly, the Ravens are a third quarter team, what we're going to call it here. The Ravens are a third quarter sometimes, but generally not a fourth quarter team. The Ravens are a third quarter team. That's what I'm going to say. Late, almost like second quarter to end of third quarter. That's the Ravens' sweet spot because they start slow. Sometimes they end slow and they can't finish games, but then you get into that sweet spot of like second, third quarter, and that is where you go if you're the Ravens and your sweet spot, your success zone. So really interesting that Baltimore still just gets off to these slow starts offensively. Then you have Zay 5 for 62, Mark 5 for 44 in that score, Rashad 2 for 43. Again, not like a big stats day, but the Ravens still put up 30 points. Lamar throws for 177. The Ravens still put up 30 points. So that's what it is. Now defensively, look, I think a lot of people saw the start from Malik Harrison in this game, myself included, and said, all right, going to be a long day for this defense. Going to be a long day for Malik Harrison without Roquan Smith being the anchor or one of the anchors of that defense. I think Malik Harrison finished the game as one of the best, if not the best player on the field for the Ravens on Monday night, which shout out to Malik, man. I mean, look, it was a tough start. We weren't seeing crazy. We weren't being crazy out there. Malik had some tough plays early in the game, but I thought that he responded really well. That whole linebacker group, I thought Chris Board had a great game. I thought that linebacker group rallied, right? I thought they did. And look, I love it when players go out there and either prove me wrong or, make me eat tweets or eat words or whatever. A lot of people were being harsh on Malik Harrison early in this game. They needed him to step up and play well in the absence of Roquan. But I thought that Malik did a great job of establishing his physicality as the game went on and punishing. I thought the linebacker core punished people, Chris Board and Malik Harrison in particular. So I really thought, and I see all up and down in the comments, shout out to Chris Board. Malik showed up. Yeah, 100%, 1,000%. That is something that this team needed. And so Malik finishes with 13 tackles, led the team by a wide margin. Nate Wiggins finishes second on the team with 6 tackles, and he had a bunch of big pass breakups on Josh Palmer, and they tested him deep in this game. And while Justin Herbert was not making very effective throws deep 20 plus yards down the field, Nate Wiggins did hold his own, and I thought Nate played really well. Well, the Ravens secondary played really well. You look at the Chargers stats here. I don't think Justin Herbert played a very good game. He made some plays. He extended plays. He knew when to step up in the pocket and found guys. And it's not all on Justin, obviously. I do want to put that out there. Quentin Johnston was the worst player on the field tonight. The worst player. And we all need to be sending, I hope we all can gather around here and rally is Ravens people. We can send a gift basket over to the Chargers facility for them drafting Quentin Johnston over Zay Flowers in the 2023 draft. They had the opportunity. Only Jackson Smith and Jigba was gone. They had their pick between Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, and Quentin Johnston, and they picked the wrong guy. Quentin Johnston has had a resurgent year in Los Angeles this season. I'm not saying he hasn't, but he almost single-handedly lost the Chargers multiple different scores on multiple different possessions and was really bad. Finished the game, 5 targets, no catches for no yards. That's how bad he was. Yep. Maximilian, I agree with this. That first drop changed the game. It did. And Justin Herbert missed a couple of reads on that play that he tried to get the ball to Josh Palmer early in the game. It was 7-0 Chargers at the time. Well, he had Josh Palmer running right across his face, but he made a decision because he saw the Ravens pressure and he couldn't get the ball out, or he got the ball out too quickly, and he misses on a wide open touchdown opportunity, and they have to settle for 3. So essentially they leave 14 points on the board and they get 3, I believe. I don't think any points came out of the Johnston drive. Maybe it was another field goal. So they left either 11 or 8 points on the board in a 7-point loss. So, yeah, thank you to Los Angeles for taking Quentin Johnston over Zay Flowers. But I thought that the Ravens defense stepped up big time. And look, I'll say it. Chargers offense, well, I don't think they're as good as they've shown. They haven't really played a bunch of good teams this season, especially, defensively. I don't think that defense is as good either. But the Chargers offense is a lot better than Pittsburgh's offense. And Baltimore, aside from that crazy last possession, and things get weird on those last possessions, Ravens defense stepped up and did their job.
Game Time has a new feature for your ticket buying experience called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. No one wants to do that. Curation makes it easier to save more, to save time, to save money on concerts, sports, comedy, theater, and more near you. You take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
The Chargers had their biggest test of the season on Monday Night Football against the Ravens. And
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers.
man, that's a tough one to swallow.
It really is, yeah. I mean, the Chargers get off to a hot start. Everything looks really, really good on Monday Night Football, and then the Ravens just decided to give the ball to Derrick Henry, and that completely changed kind of the trajectory of the game for the Chargers. And at the end of the day, they kind of out-physicaled the Chargers and beat them up most of the night.
Yeah, I mean, it did feel like they get bullied. They got bullied a little bit. And I mean, we know the Jim Harbaugh's teams pride themselves in being physical, but just felt like they didn't really have the horsepower to handle it on either side of the football. And the Ravens have been playing that brand of football for a lot longer and a lot more consistently. But make sure you guys check out FanDuel because you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. David, it's not just the loss, it's how you lose, right? I think, which is the most disappointing part of this one, because I think me and you both felt going into this, it's like, hey, if the Chargers lose to a really good team, sometimes it can be as simple as that. I think the jarring kind of eye-opening part of this loss specifically was just the way that they lost, right? The way that they got bullied. And the Chargers, it's not like this is the first game their run defense has struggled, but a lot of times they were good enough to not really have it be a huge issue, right? They've won 4 games in a row. They've had some really bad run defense games in there, but they were good enough to overcome it until they ran into a team that was willing to do it and do it over and over and over again, and to the tune of Derrick Henry running all over them. 24 carries, 140 yards, 5.8 yards per carry. Overall, 37 carries for 212 yards and 2 touchdowns. A Jim Harbaugh team had never allowed 200 rushing yards in a game. And it just sucks to see them kind of get out physical, manhandled the way that they did. I mean, they couldn't get a stop when they needed it. Every time they had a 4th and short, right? 3 different 4th and 1s that could have got them off the field. Can't get off the field on any of them. And it just sucked to watch it go down the way that it did.
Yeah, the Chargers got beat up after the first couple drives. You know, the Chargers had some success because the Ravens were, you know, really kind of throwing the football first and kind of running it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, they had that bad penalty too, right? I mean, they got a little lucky earlier. The leg whip penalty kind of threw them out of their game, but it did seem like they had a solid game plan until they didn't.
Yeah, until they didn't, exactly. And that's when, you know, the Ravens said, oh, well, let me just go ahead and hand the ball off to Derrick Henry over and over and over. And the Chargers, you know, they surrendered the edge. They missed tackles. They couldn't get him on the ground. When they did get into 3rd and long situations, they were not able to get off the football field, which was absolutely brutal. You know, it's really, really hard. It's really demoralizing when you do everything you're supposed to do to get a team in the 3rd and long situation and 4th down situation, and you can't get them off the football field. It's backbreaking. It hurts your momentum, hurts your mental too, because you're like, man, what do I got to do to get these guys off the field? And just, I mean, it must have felt like a really long night for the Chargers defense because they were going backwards pretty much the entire night.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what makes this Ravens offense so difficult because, I mean, Lamar Jackson can light you up through the air. He didn't really need to in this game, but they could just pound the rock, and if you're going to allow 5.8 yards per carry, they're just going to keep continuing to do it. And it wasn't just the defense by any means. I mean, I was surprised by the Chargers coming out hot with their rushing attack offensively, but the second half, they got out physical at the line of scrimmage. The interior of the offensive line became a much bigger problem. Penalties started racking up because they were getting beat and having to hold. They just got out physical. They got outplayed in the trenches. They got bullied by John Harbaugh and the Ravens. And really just the disappointing part is just you miss such an opportunity to have that we have arrived moment because say what you will about the 7-3 record going into it, the Chargers didn't have a statement win on their resume. They just didn't. The teams that they beat were bad. The only 500 team that was better than 500 this season was the Broncos. And that's not one that is going to prove to anyone that, hey, you're a for real team, right? Nobody's taking that and saying, okay, yeah, you're one of the best because this Ravens team went and blew the Broncos out when they played them. But after going up 10 points in this game, the Chargers were outscored 30-9 until they ended up getting that garbage touchdown late in the game, which doesn't really count for much, right? Like that it didn't really feel like, you know, a real touchdown or anything that you can really salvage. This game wasn't as close as the final score would tell you, but it also just kind of felt like they were outclassed a little bit, David. It didn't feel like they really had enough talent on either side of the ball that if they came up against this Baltimore Ravens team, or really any of the big AFC teams, like if you get any of the Ravens or the Chiefs or the Bills on your best night, I don't know if they can keep up. And I think that was kind of the hard pill to swallow in this one, was just like, hey, the Chargers came out good, seemed to have a good game plan, but at the end, they didn't have enough to keep up on either side of the football.
Yeah, I mean, they had some steam early, you know, when they get off to the big lead, but they just didn't have enough steam to be able to push it through for 4 quarters. And I think that's the difference here. And yes, it is deflating. It is disappointing when you have an opportunity to make a statement, to, say, hey, we can go beat a good team. We can, assert ourselves and make a statement. Unfortunately, they were not able to do that tonight. And, it's just another, opportunity missed for the Chargers to, say that, hey, I'm a for real threat. I'm here to meet the moment. They still, unfortunately, with this game included, have not been able to meet the moment. So, unfortunately, we don't have any other recourse but to say that this Chargers team isn't ready to compete at that level yet because they have not proven that they have been able to do so.
Yeah, I just think that you kind of saw the gap a little bit. And I know the Ravens were 7-4 going into this one. They have some fluky losses, but that's a good team, man. And I said going into it that I thought it was the best team that they were going to play this season when you're just talking about the total talent. And they were missing some of their big dogs just like the Chargers were as well. So feel bad for the great fan turnout that came out again to SoFi Stadium to have them kind of see the Chargers not be able to really stay close and make it a game late. That sucks, right? Because the Chargers fans have done such a great job at getting out there and giving this team a home field advantage. And I think what you saw in this game, frankly, was just the Chargers' flaws getting exposed. Like all of their biggest flaws, all of the things that kind of worried us throughout the season, but they were able to overcome versus the bad teams, really got put under the spotlight in this one. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that is, they aren't there yet in a lot of those ways. Now, they can still improve. This team isn't a finished product, even with the roster that they have right now. It doesn't mean that they can't get better and potentially make the playoffs and go for a run. And I think that's an important thing to keep in context here, because we're going to get into it, right? There were several key turning points in this game on both sides of the football where the Chargers could have turned this thing into a game, and it could have been really close. Obviously, the officiating we're going to talk about as well. Several plays that should have gone the Chargers' way that didn't, that really kind of changed the way the game was going and really helped the Ravens kind of bury them late in this game. But I think as far as the big picture goes, like this team is still ahead of schedule, right? This is a team that got put in a terrible salary cap situation and a team that got 5 wins last year that had to sign a bunch of one-year deals and veteran minimum deals to try to put this team together and build a roster. It's not where it needs to get yet. And I think the other great thing is hey, you have a game in Kansas City. Not that I'm looking overlooking the Falcons at all. But if you want a statement win in the AFC, you got a game in Arrowhead in a couple of weeks where you can prove it then.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And yeah, you're not going to overlook any opponent. Obviously, the Falcons are, they got some weapons on that football team. They can show up and definitely, pick up a win against the Chargers. But the Chargers do have that kind of big opportunity on that big stage. That's going to be another primetime game for the Chargers. And yeah, I think that's the biggest test that's remaining left on the schedule. That's their kind of last real regular season moment to be able to say, I am here. I am legitimate. I am a team that needs to be worried about. You have to game plan for me. You have to worry about me. That's the type of win that you need to have in order to be able to instill that fear into those opponents that you might be able to, or you might be playing in the postseason.
Yeah, and I just think when you look at this team and you look at, hey, where have the big wins for this team been even pre-Jim Harbaugh era? Like now we're going on almost 2 years of, since the Chargers have beat a real legitimate top of the AFC type of team. I mean, it might even be 2021 in Kansas City when the Chargers took down the Chiefs. Like that might be where you'd have to look at when you're looking for that signature win. But hey, I mean, the goal I think hasn't changed, right? With this team, we knew they were flawed. We didn't think they were going to win the AFC West. And the goal has always been this team could be a playoff team, get to the playoffs, and see what happens. But it doesn't make this loss any less disappointing. And that's why I want to talk about the offense, because I thought they really underwhelmed with a great matchup for Justin Herbert. And man, Quentin Johnston, after a season, off season worth of trying to build that goodwill back, felt like it all went away on one play.
Kristaps Porzingis comes back. Celtics get the 126-94 win over the Los Angeles Clippers. The other guys, Pritchard, Hauser, Cade, all of those guys, later on in the third segment. The second quarter, Jaylen Brown, second quarter. The best basketball I've seen Jaylen Brown play was in that 2-minute stretch in the second quarter. Better than almost any other stretch I've ever seen, really, honestly. That's all in the second segment. But let's get into Kristaps Porzingis. Porzingis is back. Surprise! Surprise, everybody. I did not see this coming. The Celtics kept this a very well-kept secret, even though all of us who were, reporters kept asking and digging and trying to get a conversation with Kristaps Porzingis. They went full Patriots on us on that one. And we were as surprised as you were when on Monday afternoon, the Celtics injury report said Kristaps Porzingis probable to return with the ankle surgery, recovery, all of that stuff. So he's back. He played 22 minutes, played great in those 22 minutes for the most part. 16 points, 6 of 12 shooting. Didn't shoot well from 3, 1 of 6, but 3 of 4 from the line, 6 rebounds, a couple of assists, a steal, 2 blocks, just 1 turnover. So overall, really nice game from Kristaps Porzingis. So right away, the first question is, how did he look? He looked like he barely missed a beat. Like you watch him play that game, there are a couple of signs where you're like, okay, the shooting's a little bit off. Maybe he's a little bit rusty there. The alley-oop he said after the game was hilarious. He's like, I had a couple of flat tires on those alley-oops. Jaylen Brown threw him one early in the game. Peyton Pritchard threw him one in the second game. He said, especially that one. If you go watch that play again, Porzingis barely gets the ball. It's not really a dunk necessarily. It was very much more kind of, sort of, I'm tall and I'm just barely getting this ball over the rim. He said he had no legs at that point. So those were like a couple of little hints that something was not normal about Porzingis, but everything else seemed pretty good, right? He was in the right spots. He made just one glaringly bad defensive play. Okay. Miscommunication somewhere. Or I don't even want to say it was a miscommunication. For some reason, he just walked away from his guy, and that led to an early timeout. I don't know what that was, but okay. So he had a brain fart. Not a big deal. Overall, I thought Porzingis played pretty well. Was a very important rim defender for the Celtics, and that showed in. I don't want to say it was a complete, points in the paint reversal, but the Clippers had 58, but there were stretches there in the third quarter, and then later in the game. So the Celtics didn't exactly fix the points in the paint problem, but also one of the things that I've been saying is, okay, they give up a lot of points in the paint. They're running teams off of the three-pointer a lot more, and you saw that again here where the Clippers had just 26 attempts. The Celtics had 22 makes. The Sixers had 26 attempts. So once again, Celtics math, Missoula math, that's not going to win you any games. Celtics 22 of 51 from 3. Clippers 7 of 26 from 3. Right there, the math is way off, way out of whack. You're never going to win those games. But and some of the trade-off is you give up some twos, and sometimes those show up as points in the paint, and the Celtics will get better at points in the paint for sure, but they definitely had some problems there along the way. Fourth quarter, I think, was, well, no. Oh, no, I'm looking at the wrong category. That's why I was like, wow, how can there be no points in the paint? Because, yeah, fourth quarter was a problem for the most part, and that was a lot of the garbage time. So the number's a little skewed. Regardless, Porzingis was there. He helped. One of the plays of the game was his block on Chris Dunn, where Jaylen Brown was playing great defense. Jaylen played great defense, but the ball got knocked loose, and Jaylen went one way, Chris Dunn went the other, and he lost them. And right at the end of the shot clock, Dunn was like, I have an opening. He goes up, Porzingis swallows him up. And that moment was like, oh, yes, that's exactly what the Celtics are looking for. That type of paint protection is going to be what kind of equalizes the points in the paint. But regardless, one of the things that I think Porzingis does help is he bumps up the Celtics points in the paint. So the Celtics had 46. They only lost that by 12. Okay, so they give up a bunch, but as long as they're scoring a bunch and they kind of level that off, then that helps the Celtics math. So when the Celtics are, what did they have, 15 15 more 3-pointers. So, God, that's crazy. 45-point differential at the 3-point line. So a 12-point differential in points in the paint, that's not going to make up any differences. The Celtics went to the line more, so the Clippers really had nowhere along the way to make up any of the difference that the shooting was creating. So Porzingis helps with the points in the paint, some putbacks, the post-ups. In the third quarter, the Celtics came out. They had a 29-point lead at half because of that dominant second quarter that I'll talk about after the break. Oh, by the way, today's show is brought to you by Built. Built Rewards. You can start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA. That's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNBA. So, completely lost my train of thought there. But Porzingis does equalize the points in the paint there. Third quarter, that's where I was. Third quarter, where the Celtics had built a 29-point lead at halftime. They come out to start the third, kind of predictable after building up a 29-point lead that they came out. The energy was definitely off. You could feel the energy was off. And after a few minutes, the Clippers made their run. They cut it to 15. Where do they go? The first part of it was stabilizing it, and it's Kristaps Porzingis, 2 post-ups. That's huge to have him be able to dump the ball into him. I think he hits one. He gets 2 free throws on the other, and it just calms things down. So Porzingis defensively allows the Celtics to be a little bit more aggressive, get some turnovers, and they forced 14 of them. And on offense, he can calm them down by being the post player, by not just setting good picks and not just taking good threes, but those post-ups are a big part of why the Celtics last year were able to kind of avoid giving up these big runs. So that happens here in the third quarter. Then after that, Pritchard and Hauser do their thing that I'm going to talk about later. But Porzingis just all around shows you what he's capable of unlocking. So really good game from Kristaps Porzingis. I thought it was indicative of how he's going to help all around. I think Jaylen Brown is going to benefit a ton from having his guy, the cookies and cream, if you want to go with that nickname. Not my favorite, but I don't have an alternative, so let's go with it. I think Jaylen is going to be unlocked.
Game Time has a new feature for your ticket buying experience called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. No one wants to do that. Curation makes it easier to save more, to save time, to save money on concerts, sports, comedy, theater, and more near you. You take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
Kyle Whittingham offered an update about his decision about when or if he will return for next season. And
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes.
Michelle, got to talk about everything that Kyle Whittingham laid out in his press conference. He talked about Isaac Wilson, what happened with the injury, also just some other interesting things like some players who already indicated their potential desire to come back for Utah. But we have to start with the future of Kyle Whittingham and then Cam Rising. Kyle Whittingham, when asked about his future, stated that it's one of those things that he is going to take his time and will evaluate his future after the season. And the decision, this was by far the biggest thing he said to me. His decision will be about what's best for the program, not himself. That to me is very interesting wording because we know Kyle Whittingham is the ultimate competitor. And there's part of him that may not want to go out with a season like this. But when he makes a statement like that, what's best for this program moving forward, that to me also could indicate that maybe I'm not the best guy to lead this going forward. So I said recently, I feel like it's 50-50, like 51-49 about if he's going to come back or retire. Like, it still feels like there's a lot of ways that this can go. And I mean, a comment like that, I think, points to how this really could be, this Friday could be the last game Kyle Whittingham coaches at Utah. It's a very real possibility, right, Michelle?
Absolutely. I think anything and everything is kind of on the table at this point for the Utes. They have a lot of tough decisions to kind of work through and make, and that's going to start, I think, with some really tough self-evaluations, both from head coach on down, even to players. And I think it's an unfortunate part of this industry, but what's happened this year, kind of unacceptable based off of where this program has gone to. So it kind of points to that there just might be some really, like I said, tough, heartbreaking decisions that are made as far as what the future of this program is ultimately going to look like. And yeah, I mean, if you're taking Whit's words at face value, to me, that sounds like someone that maybe is contemplating, I don't want to say doubt, that's maybe a little bit too strong of a word, but contemplating whether or not they have what it takes to continue on this journey and get the program where it needs to go. Is that ultimately what he decides? Who's to say? I mean, honestly, the only person that's going to know that is going to be Kyle Whittingham. And he's going to keep that very, very tight to the vest, as he has in his past when this has kind of come up. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. It'll be interesting to find out if actually a decision hasn't already been made. Who knows what's going on with that? What I do think and what I do feel confident about, though, is, like I said, there's just going to be some tough conversations in that building in this offseason, which starts shockingly early for this team for the first time since 2013.
I mean, 4-0 start to at least losing 7 of your last 8. And then obviously if you fall on Friday, very real possibility with how this team's looked. And obviously down to Batari now, even though he did some good things on last Saturday, but just when you go that deep into the depth chart, then it's going to be tough to win a cross-country road game when UCF is also trying to end their season on a high note. And yeah, I mean, the fact this team isn't bowl eligible when they started 4-0, it's just the way they've lost all of these games with chances, plays to maybe win, and just consistently losing games. That's where you have to have tough conversations, because what was on the table for Utah, potential historic season, everyone's preseason pick to be Big 12 champs. And you don't just fall short of that, you fall like drastically. And that's not even like selling it to how badly this team is obviously underperformed that. Then there has to be changes made up and down your program. So it'll be interesting to see what those are. And one change that could be made not change, but coming into the year would be a change is Cam Rising, because when he did get hurt, he would be able to make his decision on whether or not he's going to return to Utah in the next week to 10 days, Kyle Whittingham said. So for me, when I look at this, I can't, Michelle, I can't see a world where Utah wants to do this again with Cam, or Cam wants to do this again. We've heard recently again, like Cam is frustrated, like just the crap he's continued to get from the fans and everyone from not being able to play when he wants to be out there. He wants to go out there. I love what Cam Rising's done for this program. I don't think if you're Utah, like we take our emotions out of what Cam has meant for this program, I don't think you can move. I don't think you can go into the next season saying, hey, Cam Rising is our quarterback. He has the injury history he has. And I can't imagine Cam wants to come back with everything he's had to go through, as I mentioned. So I know he said he's going to take the next 5 to 10 days. I just have a really hard time seeing Cam Rising being on Utah's roster next fall.
That'll be an interesting thing to watch. I've heard some interesting things both ways. Again, I think there's a lot of tough things that Cam has had to weigh and probably is still weighing, and that Utah has to weigh when it comes to Cam Rising. It's how much do you want to beat up your body at this point? It's how much do you really want to beat yourself up? Because yeah, some fans have made up their mind and have been disgustingly rude. I will throw that out there. and without, I think, knowing the full details or the full story, because Cam hasn't been able to speak for himself because of how the program runs their policy on injuries. So a lot of assumptions have been made by some people, and we all know what assume stands for. When you assume something, you make it of
Yes.
you and me.
Thank
So it's some of you are wearing that very proudly. I will say that, just to be forthright. But it's, do you move on to the next phase of your life? What does that look like? Is it still at Utah as a GA? Do you want to go someplace else for a fresh start? Do you want to do something completely different than football? Do you feel like you still have something left to give to football? And if so, do you want to continue on with Utah, or do you want to maybe go someplace else? And then the questions start coming in. Well, if you do stay at Utah, there probably has to be some agreements and some parameters put in place. I think this is a case where he probably would have to earn it. If he comes in, I think this is at the point where Utah would have to say, you're not the incumbent starter, but you are more than welcome to stay and compete for the job. We'll bring some other people in, and hopefully they'll be comfortable also competing for the job. At boosters and some of that may, decide that they don't want to spend as much NIL on that. And it just depends on, are all parties agreeable? But like I said, I think there's a lot of tough conversations that have to be had in that arena. I think Cam's had to mull over a lot of tough things. And it'll be interesting to see where his mind's at, because he has been through the ringer, both physically and emotionally over the last couple of weeks. And it'll just be interesting to see where his headspace is at and where he kind of envisions himself moving forward one way or another.
It will be. And it's a very complicated situation when you talk about just what has happened with Cam Rising. And I totally agree with what you said too about the way that fans have treated him and what they've said about him when they don't know the extent of the injuries and how this is a guy who fights so hard to be out there. And it's just, I feel so bad for him that he's had the horrible injury luck that he has. And and what you said, Michelle, there's a lot of big decisions that Utah football has to make. One decision they don't have to make this week: who's going to be their starting quarterback? Luke Patari played well last week when he came in late, but there's no controversy because of who's going to start, because Isaac Wilson is officially out for Utah's final game, so therefore out for the season.
Game Time has a new feature for your ticket buying experience called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. No one wants to do that. Curation makes it easier to save more, to save time, to save money on concerts, sports, comedy, theater, and more near you. You take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
It's Clemson Hate Week. We are back.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Clemson Hate Week. Have you hated someone from Clemson today? I have. I met my girlfriend's brother, who is a Clemson grad, and had some words with him about what's at stake this weekend in Clemson, South Carolina. I think it was a Memorial Stadium. I don't even know. It's fake Death Valley. But what's at stake? Let's start off with the basics. In-state rivalry. Battle for Palmetto State. Big Thursdays, they used to call it growing up, like a long, long time ago. Some of you guys might be too young for that. There's a lot at stake, especially with pride and all the in-state bragging rights and all that kind of stuff. Everyone in the state, you're either Clemson or you're South Carolina. There's really no in between, and everyone knows that. And it is a big weekend, because this is a weekend where I think a lot of Clemson fans thought, like last year especially, oh, you know what? It's a return to order. We're going to win. We had that fluke that happened in Clemson a couple of years ago. This won't happen again. We're ready to go. And they have I think it was 16-7 or some low scoring game. I think. Now you have this year, and there's a lot on the line. There's in-state bragging rights. There's battles for recruits in state. Putting up a fence around your state, no matter what state you're in, is a very, very big deal. It's a very, very big deal. But bigger than just that is the fact that looming around the corner is a potential shot at the college football. The other thing that's at stake, this is something I brought up weeks ago. Not a lot of you were happy with me when I did. That's fine. I think I prefaced it by saying don't kill the messenger. So don't kill the messenger. But there's a playoff bid potentially at stake. Here's the thing. When we started talking about this a couple weeks ago, one of the things that was brought up was it was a small chance. It's a small chance that South Carolina was going to be able to make the playoff with, the 3 losses, and they had like all the things that were in front of them that had to happen. I said it on here. I was going through it and I said, I was like, listen, there is a path. And I started reading off the Brad Crawford tweet and going over all the things that had to happen. And that was like a laundry list, like a kid's Christmas wish list that just didn't stop. And at the end of it, I even said, I was like, I wish I didn't bring that up because I feel like it's not possible. But here's the thing. It is. And all the things that have had to happen for South Carolina to get there so far have happened. Now you need to win out this game, right? You need to win this game. But everything else that had to happen has happened so far. All right, we paused a couple of times. So I don't remember exactly where we were, but let's just get back into this. We brought this up. All the things that had to have happened for South Carolina to make the college football playoff have happened. Like Bama lost, Ole Miss lost. Now, there's a case that you could make for Ole Miss that if they're 9-3 and they've beaten South Carolina, then sure, the results on the field have to matter. The committee has tried to somewhat say that. At least people around the committee have said it. But there's just this overwhelming feeling and this groundswell of support. It's a phrase I keep using over and over and over again, that even if South Carolina has the current longest active winning streak out of any team in the SEC. It's 5, which is wild, but that's still the case. So if that's the case, and they have a 5-game winning streak, longer than any other team in the SEC, I know they played an FCS team on Saturday, but they beat the brakes off of them. You saw the way they beat A&M. You've seen the way they beat these other teams. You better lose. The case that they have made for these other teams, it's a quality loss, it's a close loss, it's blah, blah, blah. All of those same cases can be made for South Carolina. There's 3 losses. However, most of those losses were very, very close losses. They were losses in terms of what's the best way to put it? You lost by 2 points on the road, right? Everyone knows how big of a deal and how big of an impact SEC officiating has become this season. There's just no other way around it. And that loss to LSU is pretty excusable. Also, all of those losses came early in the season. And again, you've done nothing but win convincingly since then. So I've said this before, and I will say it again. The idea that South Carolina can make the playoff is a pretty, I'm not saying it's a better shot to make it than not. What I am saying is this. We've talked about this for 3 weeks. The first week we talked about, there's a 14% chance they would make it. 14%, not great, right? There was 20. Following week, it was 14. Last week, it was 12. As I said, all the things that had to happen, happened. The ESPN All-State Playoff Predictor, if they win out, is now for South Carolina 58%. 58%. It's a really big deal. And making the playoffs as a 9-3 team and the only 9-3 deserving team from this conference, there's one thing that I think is very true from all this is that the SEC is going to try to get as many teams in as possible. The Big Ten has 4 locks: Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State all have a 98% chance or better to get into the playoff. The SEC is not going to want to feel left behind and held out of the playoff, right? Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, all with overwhelmingly positive chances or odds to get in. Georgia's like over 90%. Tennessee, I think, is over their 70%. As long as they beat Vandy, they're in. And you have Texas, which is whatever. Because if Texas loses this weekend, they might be out. But that being said, you've seen Greg Sankey try to go to bat for the SEC and say, listen, we want a guaranteed 4 teams in. That's one of the reasons they're going to go to 14 teams. He wants a guarantee that, hey, listen, we're getting this many teams in. If they don't get them in, what other conference is going to sneak in a team over the SEC? You're not going to get 2 Group of 5 teams, so you can cancel that out, right? The Big 12 is most likely not going to happen because you have no one that's undefeated from there anymore. Colorado just lost to Kansas, who's 4-6 or 5-6 now. You have BYU, who lost again to Arizona State, so Arizona State could get in. Whoever wins the conference will get a automatic win. So you're talking about like an Arizona State team, I think it's 9-2. If they win out, then they can be 10-2, maybe 11-2 if they win the Big 12. But you're not putting 2 Big 12 teams in there. The only other option that you started to see from the odds is the ACC. And who's the team they're talking about from the ACC? It's Clemson. If Clemson can win out, they would have a good shot at getting in. But here's the thing. If that same team that you've been propping up saying that you're going to win, if they win, they could potentially be in. If they lose, then the team they lose to would theoretically be just as deserving, and that's South Carolina.
Game Time has a new feature for your ticket buying experience called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. No one wants to do that. Curation makes it easier to save more, to save time, to save money on concerts, sports, comedy, theater, and more near you. You take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Jeff, the first thought of my head is about number 18. And he did some good things. He's done great things all year in the 11 games that he's played in the Scarlet and Gray. And I don't know about you, Jeff. I'm going to throw this statement out there. I'm going to hear your reply in a second. I believe Ohio State can rely on Will Howard in this game to snap the 3-game losing streak.
I absolutely do, Jay. When Will Howard chose Ohio State last spring, I remember, honestly, that was what kind of flipped the switch and got, Ohio State fans, out of the doldrums, move on to the next page. I was a big Will Howard fan because I just accidentally got to watch, several of his games. And of course that, Big 12 championship game just sticks in my head of how impressive that was in the moment. And I thought he, checked every box for what Ohio State needed. And boy, has he been better than I thought he could have been. This isn't a guy that they've had to help out. This isn't a guy, that they've had to drag along. This isn't a guy that they've had to rely on the athletes around him to bail him out a little bit like we had to last year, it's completely opposite. Chip Kelly's been able to run the offense that he wants to run. Now it's not perfect. Sometimes it looks perfect, but it hasn't been perfect, but he's still able to run. He doesn't have to just, result in, just take your best guy and throw it to him. Jeremiah Smith could have won every game for him and had 20 catches like we did Harrison last year. That's not what we had to do. When Will Howard's been called, he's thrown great. I thought, it's little stuff like the touchdown he threw to Egbuka last weekend. I thought was beautiful. He ran the play. He threw it at the exact right time, which is what we complain about with quarterbacks. He threw it exact right time, exact right pace, exact right arch, he made it catchable. He threw it over the defender, just little things like that. When he they call people like a system quarterback or whatever, game manager and all that. Like, no, he's running the offense. He knows where the read is. He's recognizing. Well, here's what I like most about Will Howard. He throws to a lot of open receivers, which tells me he's seen open receivers.
Yes.
These guys aren't making contested catches play after play after play. His deep ball, it's not going to get any better. Okay. We know that that's a deficiency.
Mm-hmm.
He's not CJ Stroud. He's not Justin Fields when it comes to that, but I don't think it's killed him. In the future, that's a whole different thing if things go well, but as of right now, it's better than expected. I think the whole season has been on Will Howard's shoulders, and he's accepted it. He looks relaxed. He looks like he's enjoying it. He looks like he understands the moment. So absolutely, I think that this is a Will Howard game. This is where Will Howard can become an Ohio State legend in this game.
I think it's a good way to look at it because what he's done so far, even if you look at the Indiana game, if you look at the Penn State game, and even the Oregon game, like I know it was a loss, he was mere seconds from doing everything he needed to do in that moment to win the game. He understands how to rise to the occasion, and he made a mistake. Like, he literally mismanaged the clock. James Franklin does it all the time. So, like, that stuff is stuff that happens all the time where guys happen to do that. He's never really been on that stage before. He's never played in Austin Stadium. That's a very weird and odd place to play. So he made a mistake. He has learned from it, though. Ryan Day's learned from it. Chip Kelly's learned from it. And I think the biggest thing for this week, where things are different, in Happy Valley, where he realized, look, last drive of the game, I ain't throwing the ball. You need me to get a QB sneak to get out from the end zone being right at our back? Cool, I'll go 4 yards on a QB sneak. Most quarterbacks don't want to do a QB sneak at all. If they do, it's a 1 yard or 2 yard, and we're good. Will Howard's like, no, if you want me to get 5 or 6 or 7, like, I'm 6'4", 235. I can do that with my body, and the guys on the old line will help me get that done. But his enthusiasm, where he called Happy Valley, Sad Valley at the end of that game, but then when he kind of punched that last touchdown in at the end of this past game against Indiana, and he did the OH, and then he just like fist pumped in the air, and the excitement and enthusiasm there, that's a guy you can rely on. He's not being asked to throw for 300 yards, but he can do that if they need him to. He's not being asked to run 10+ times, but he can do that if Ohio State needs him to. You can rely on a guy like that who just understands his job and runs the offense the way Chip Kelly wants it to be ran. I understand Michigan's defense is going to throw things at Ohio State that they haven't seen all year. And when that happens, Indiana did that same thing. Will Howard rose to the occasion. I believe they can rely on him once again, which is weird because I wasn't really sold on his arm, Jeff, coming into this season. He wasn't really the most accurate passer. This year, he's had 6 games of being at least an 80% passer. So the biggest thing you want from your quarterback that was a question mark from him is now a strength for him. You can rely on a guy like that.
And let me tell you, I was in Columbus, Ohio I wasn't at the game, but I was very close to the stadium during that game. That was I didn't want to go outside, let alone go outside and play football, let alone, I believe he went 22 for 26.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he makes it look effortless. Again, he's running an offense. He has an offensive coordinator that knows what he can do. And he's made 10 throws this year that I'm like, okay, when we need that throw, at least we know he can make it. And that's what's been so impressive. But it looks like his teammates like him. It looks like, let's face it, the quarterback is what the team is going to be decided by. This team, we know it's around. It's been like this for years. If the guy behind center is one of those dudes, Ohio State's very good. And so, like, when you're that good, like, your team is with you. You know what I mean? They got your back. It doesn't look like there's any complaints. I mean, Jeremiah Smith, we know you could do whatever you want, Jeremiah Smith. He could have whatever type of season he wants, but he realizes, like, that's not what we're here for. And this team has also been coached, and whether right or wrong, we don't know if it's going to be a mistake yet. This team has been coached as if it's going to play 4 or 5 more games this season.
Correct.
And so there's a lot of yardage left on the table. There's a lot of meat on the bone with this Ohio State offense. And, so I just think the way Howard's handled it and took the brunt of it and is really ready, never looked scared. And let's face it. I mean, I know we talk about this all the time. The throw that he made that got called back against Oregon was a game-winning, great throw.
Yes.
So I give him credit for making the play because he doesn't know it's going to be, pass interference until they call it. So he made the throw, the key throw, and, Smith made the catch. So like, that gives me hope. I think he's totally aware, of what this game coming up is going to mean. He seems like a kid who understands just the history of college football and the impact of college football. So, and man, we really, really lucked out with getting a guy and a leader like Howard this year for High State.
Jeff, one of those throws you talk about, how he could just make the throw. I'm still sitting here as you're talking, thinking about that 3rd and 35, then the 4th and 10 to Carnell Tate. And I was literally watching the game, and I'm thinking, okay, it's 4th and 10. You're going to settle for a long field goal. Will Howard's still on the field, and they go out there and throw that dot to the Carnell Tate. I'm like, what in the world is this? What am I watching? Like, this is not what I expected Will Howard to do, but his arm has been so much better, and he's able to make the Oregon throw, the throw. I mean, even the confidence that he made in the throw to Jelani Thurman along the back of the end zone after Jelani Thurman dropped the ball, was an interception. He's like, hey, man, I got you. Put it right in the same spot again. Now, granted, the ball was wet, and so maybe the ball was slippery, impacted Jelani Thurman, but Jelani Thurman still had both hands on the ball.
Yeah.
He's supposed to catch it. He dropped it. He's like, hey, man, I know what happened earlier. I got confidence in you. Let's try this pitch and catch thing again. So
that's a good point. That's a great point to bring up. That was a great looking play. And with all the pressure on, and that's a point in the game to where, like, man, we've almost got this one wrapped up. Let's go for it. Let's go for the kill shot. But to be able to calm yourself down and make that throw, that's some stuff that like CJ Stroud could do. Those are some things. And that's what a quarterback has to be able to do in the height and the excitement and the adrenaline's pumping, calm yourself and throw exactly to a guy that, maybe overthinking it a little bit, but he didn't. Congratulations to Thurman too. But that's also my whole point is like this team like believes they really do. It's a different me, I'm never one for the intangibles and the belief and the mental stuff. This team, it's all this, especially this week, it's all mental. This game is all, this team's better than the team up north. This team is better. It's all mental this week. It's the focus. It's the not making, the little bonehead plays. It's getting past that, terrible interception, that Howard got. Like, it really wasn't on him, but whatever it was, and to come back and play the way he did. That's the little things that these guys have to be able to get past and not panic when Michigan throws the kitchen sink at them. So all great stuff. Yeah. I mean, just like I say, again, over and over, he's just made the right throw and just the touch he's been able to have in heightened moments has been awesome.